We start the broadcast now, okay?
Perfect.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, MBA Application Tips. What does John Molson School of Business look for in an MBA candidate? Our speaker today, Anna Brochet, Candidate Recruitment Manager, will give you more insights for the entire process. She will be able to answer your questions in the Q&A section after her presentation. Please post your questions in the chat and the Q&A sections of this webinar, so she will be able to answer them afterwards. Okay, I give you the floor now.
Great, thank you very much, Donka. Good afternoon, everyone. As Donka said, my name is Anna. I am the Manager in Recruitment and Marketing for the graduate programs at Concordia University, John Molson School of Business. So if you have any questions for the Tips and Tricks webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A section. I will be entering them at the end. If you have any questions afterwards, or if you want to connect to talk about business school, to talk about your resumes, your profiles, please feel free to email me. I'll leave my information at the end of this webinar as well. And so I'd like to kick off today's session by talking a little bit about some of the MBA myths that you might have heard or that we hear a lot as admissions and recruitment counselors. One of the most common ones, and it might be something that you're telling yourself or that you're wondering as well. A lot of candidates tell us, maybe I can't do an MBA because of my background. I'm just not a math person. I'm not a business person. And so let me reassure you that MBA programs are extremely diverse, especially we tell candidates all the time that really the richness of the class discussion comes from having a diversity of candidates. So whether you have a business background or an engineering background, or whether maybe you were a former artist or maybe a former professional athlete, anything that you bring to the table will bring richness to those discussions in class. And so it is not rare for us to see candidates who either have a limited business background or no business background at all. So don't hesitate to look for MBAs. Depending on your career goals, we are here to advise you and to help you find the right fit for you. Another myth that we hear a lot is that MBAs only lead to consulting and finance. So a lot of candidates are like, oh, I'm not interested in consulting or finance, so maybe I'm not a good fit for an MBA. Well, the truth is there's a multitude of roles that you can aspire to have after graduation. And although consulting and finance are considered two of the big pillars of the MBA, there's also a lot of candidates that we see that end up going in, for example, nonprofit, or they go in operations for the healthcare sector or pharmaceuticals. You might go into tech companies. Some people start their own business after graduation. Of course, there's some people who go in consulting and finance, but there's also a multitude of roles within those two industries as well. We even had candidates who were interested in marketing who ended up in financial institutions, but in very marketing-focused roles as well. So there's a very wide array of things that you can do with an MBA. So don't limit yourself thinking that there's only two fields, because there's a lot that you can do by building those skills and building that network. Another third, I guess, myth that we hear a lot is from candidates who really want to perform on the GMAT, and they say, oh, if I score 700 or 750 GMAT, that will guarantee me a spot in a good Canadian program or a good program in general. The fact is, if this was the case, it would be so much easier for us recruiters, because there's so many candidates who do apply with 700 GMAT scores. But what we're looking for when we look at admissions, and this is applicable not only for John Molson School of Business, but for any MBA program, we look at candidates really holistically. So not only your GMAT score or your performance at this one exam, it does help, but it's not the only thing, but also everything else that you bring to the table. So you're going to hear a lot of the admissions and recruitment counselors tell you that we're looking at it holistically, and that really is the case, no matter which program you apply to. We're going to be looking, of course, at your academic credentials, and the GMAT is part of that, but also the GPA, but we'll also look at what kind of work experience you bring, also the quality of your work experience. We'll be looking also at your extracurricular involvement, because we're looking at, future leaders. So that tells us a lot about your leadership potential. We're also going to be paying close attention to your communication skills. both in writing and in speaking, so throughout the interview, and when you meet with the different representatives of the schools. And finally, we're going to be trying to assess how good of a fit are you for a school. So the fit is a variety of things. It's of course you meeting all of those criteria, but also in what kind of environment can you thrive? What kind of MBA program is the best fit for you? What are you looking to achieve? How can we help you achieve those goals? So it is a two-way street. It's not just us trying to get the best candidates. It's also the candidates making sure that this is the right school for them. So we're going to talk a little bit about those different sections today. And again, if you have any questions about anything that I'm mentioning and I may not have answered, please feel free to use the Q&A and I'll address them at the end. So first, my first advice for all candidates, and again, this is applicable for any program you decide to apply to, is really to demonstrate your academic potential. So the GMAT is a good way to do that, but as I said, the GMAT doesn't guarantee admission. We'll look at the GMAT and we'll look at the GPA from your undergraduate degree to make sure that you can take the academic rigor of the MBA program. Depending on the class, some classes are more theoretical, some classes are more case-based, so it's important to figure out which ones you're going to be taking, how you're going to be able to perform in those. Some universities will be looking at a strict minimum for the GMAT, and some universities will have a recommended minimum, so make sure which one it is, and also make sure to double check the average of the GMAT score that is required by a school, because typically that tells you that if you perform above that average, you have better chances not only of admission, but sometimes also scholarships. So we'll look at the GMAT and the GPA, but we also take in consideration the entire GPA as well as the last 2 years, depending on the institution. And we also take in consideration what you were doing during your study. So let's say you were working full-time or part-time, or if you were involved in different extracurriculars, don't hesitate to highlight that in your resume or to address that in your essays, because that's something that we want to know. So for example, someone might have had a slightly lower GPA, but they were a varsity athlete, or they were involved in a lot of different organizations. Make sure to showcase that. And in addition to the GMAT and the GPA and your extracurricular involvement during your studies, we do value other certifications as well. So it doesn't replace the GMAT or the GPA, but it's added value definitely. So if you've done the CPA in Canada or CA elsewhere, or if you've done your CFA, whichever level, if you were a project manager, you did your PMP, or if you did additional studies like a graduate certificate or a master's degree or any diploma, we do look at all of those. So let's say you have a slightly lower GPA in your undergraduate degree, but you compensate with a great GMAT, with a good performance in your master's or your certificate. These are all things that we'll be looking at. And again, it is a very holistic process, so that's just one part of the application. The second advice that I have for all candidates is really to showcase your professional achievements. So of course you're doing an MBA because you want to maybe advance your career, maybe you want to pivot your career, but all in all, the university is going to be introducing you to different companies, exposing you to different professionals. So of course we want to know about your professional achievements. So it's not just a matter of quantity, although a lot of programs have a minimum requirement. Typically it's about 2 years, and the average is typically 5 to 6 years. But it's really about the quality of work experience. So if you've led projects, if you've managed teams, if you've grown in your career, like let's say you were promoted once or maybe multiple times, make sure that it is clearly highlighted in your resume. And we're looking for accomplishments. So not just the responsibilities, but really how did you impact your company or your role? What did you do that was different? And how do you showcase those qualities of leadership potential, your teamwork, your decision-making or strategic input? All of these things are things that we want to see, and as much as possible, within 1 or maybe 2 pages for the resumes. We go through a lot of resumes, but if you're unsure about the format, I invite you to check all the websites of the schools you're interested in. Typically, we have a template, and you can follow those. It's good to adapt it to the kind of school that you'll be applying to make sure that this is the format that they're looking for. Format is not as important as content, so make sure that the content is strong. And if you're a little bit unsure, you can of course talk to us recruiters. That's what we're here for. We're going to help you with your application and give you advice as we go through them. And then another thing that is important is to highlight your personal achievements as well. Sometimes, people focus only on the academic and the professional, but we want to know who you are as individuals as well. So let's say you were passionate about sports, or you did, music to a certain degree, or you were a former artist. Like, these are all things that we want to hear about, as well as if you volunteered for special causes. There are some causes that you're particularly passionate about. Make sure to highlight that in your resume as well, because we do pay attention to that. And of course, the MBA is a great opportunity to get even more involved in some of those aspects. So it's a good way to make sure that this is indeed the right fit for you. As well as if you started your own business, whether it's a successful or unsuccessful business, make sure to highlight that as well, because there are definitely opportunities to build on that and to share that experience during the classroom. So yeah, anything that you can highlight from your professional, academic, and personal are things that we want to know about. Like, if you've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, I don't know, if you have, gotten a specific award, put that all out there and put yourself out there so that we can see who you are and what you bring to the table. Another section that you might see in the application is typically either an essay or a statement of purpose. And for that part, I think the most important thing is really to be genuine, to be yourself, to write it yourself, first of all. Sometimes it could be a little bit awkward if you ask someone else to write it and then we ask you about it and you don't remember what you wrote. But also to be concise, to be precise in the way that you write it. So make sure to check the spelling, make sure to address the right school. My recommendation is always do not copy paste your essay from one school to another. We know you're applying to multiple schools, that's okay. You need a contingency plan and you might have like your top 3 schools, but each school is looking for something slightly different in terms of the way they formulate their questions. So even if the question may seem similar, or even if the statement of purpose seem like it's it's the one and same thing, it's actually quite different. So make sure to address the right school, make sure that you have done the right research on the school, the reasons why you want to join it, or the program specifically, and try to stay within the word limit as much as possible. We go through hundreds, sometimes thousands of essays and statement of purpose, and so we impose the word limit to make it a fair process. So make sure to try to stay within that word limit as much as possible. It's a great exercise to be concise and to be impactful in a short amount of time. So make the most of that opportunity. Another part of the application that is extremely important is, of course, your referees. Now, some schools might ask you for professional referees only. Some schools might accept academic and professional. In our case, we accept both. And it's good to contact your referee ahead of time, because sometimes the application process might be very quick if you upload everything right away. But if you haven't notified your referees, it might take them some time to upload. Sometimes they have links that expired. Sometimes they just didn't have the time, and then it delays your application, uselessly. So my advice is always, if you have a referee, make sure that it's someone who knows you well, who wants the best for you, and let them know why you're applying, why it's important, and what the timeline is, so that they can make the most of the time that they have and make sure to do it in a timely manner. And I tend to recommend people preferably don't write your letter of reference for your referee. Sometimes, your referee is so busy, and I understand that it might seem easier to write it for them and then they sign it. But it has happened in the past where one person would submit the same letter 3 times with just a few change of words and same format and everything and just a different name. And it's just, we have then to contact them to make sure that, this is an authentic reference, and then we have to ask them more questions. And so it's better if you maybe give them guidelines on what you would like them to highlight about you, but preferably I strongly recommend not to write it for them. And then another, of course, very important section is the interview. You'll typically, whichever school you apply, so there's somewhat of an interview process. It could be a video interview, it could be an in-person interview, it could be a combination of both. And it really is important to treat that the same way you would for any job interview. That means be punctual. I know time might seem a little bit, easier now that We are all on Zoom and all online, but I think it's really important to be punctual, to show how professional you are. Be prepared for the interview. Make sure that you've done your research again. You wouldn't show up at a job interview thinking you're interviewing for another company or not knowing anything about the company. So apply that same logic to an admissions interview. So research the school, prepare some questions. Again, it is a two-way street, so we don't want someone who will just, tell us what we want to hear. We also want to make sure that this is going to be a good fit for you and for what you're trying to achieve. So don't hesitate to ask us questions. That's what we're here for. And then dress the part, be professional. And I'm saying always wear pants. As you can see on my slide, you might be wondering of course I'm going to wear pants. But when you do a Zoom interview or a Skype interview, it might be tempting to dress up just the top. But then if you accidentally have to stand up for any reason, it can create a very awkward situation. So I strongly recommend dress from top to bottom, very professionally. Treat the interview with the utmost, seriousness that it is. And remember that the universities, we're trying to figure out who's going to be part of our network. We're going to have employers coming on campus. And the reflection of our students is the way we're reflected in the job market. And that's how we maintain great relationships with our employers. So we want to make sure that whoever comes in the program is professional and they will be a great representative of our MBA to potential employers. And that will be better for everyone in the long run. Our employers will be happy, students will find better placement, and it's a cycle. So no matter which school it is that you're applying to, I think we all share the same sentiment. Make sure to be punctual, to be prepared, and to take the interview seriously. Another advice that I tend to give is interact with the school. It's great that you guys are here today. You're gathering some information. There will be opportunities to connect with different admissions advisors or maybe recruiters. And so you want to make sure to make valuable use of the admissions team's time. So if you schedule a one-to-one meeting, again, be prepared for the meeting. I tend to say, if we only have 20 minutes, don't ask me any question that you can easily have access to online. Or if you haven't done any research, then it's okay to acknowledge that you haven't done it. It creates a bit more of an expectation when you meet with a recruiter. It is an ongoing relationship, so it doesn't mean that you're going to meet this one person and never meet them again. Make sure to have the opportunity to build that. And I always tell candidates, make sure to connect with alumni and current students of the program, because I can tell you all the great things about the program and, the rankings and how well we do, but it's another thing to experience it as a student. So make sure that you connect with people who have gone through it, who have been, positively impacted, and they can tell you if it's a good fit for you, what they were involved in, and you can make sure that this is the right program, whether it is a large class size, a small class size, whether it's something that's very case focused or something more theoretical. You can find that all out through students and alumni, and they will tell it all to you because they want to make sure that this is indeed a good fit. And again, take the process seriously with all the schools. I know sometimes it's tempting. You're like, okay, I have my number one school, and then I'm just gonna keep a whatever relationship with the other schools. Like, don't do that. Make sure that every school feels that you're the number one choice, or they're your number one choice, to make sure that you can attend there and be excited about it. I always tell candidates, don't apply just for the sake of applying, right? Make sure that whichever school you're applying to is a school you're excited to join to a certain degree because of X reason. Maybe you really like the kind of extracurriculars, maybe you really like a specific type of class, maybe you like their methodology, maybe you like their network, maybe you like their location. Make sure it's something that you are excited about so that you can feel motivated to talk to them and to maintain that relationship. And if you do that, no matter which school you attend, you'll be satisfied, you'll have a great experience. And then my final advice, maybe that should have been my first piece of advice, is to figure out the reason why. Why are you doing an MBA? I think that's really important. That's going to be a question that will recur countlessly. Figure out your current situation, figure out your current strength. Where are you trying to head? How does the MBA fit in this equation? Don't do an MBA just to have a pretty title, because there's pretty titles everywhere. You want to make sure you're doing it for the right reason. It is a significant amount of time and typically financials. So also make sure that this fits right into the equation of your life right now. Think of your career goals. What are you trying to achieve? Does this school offer opportunities to achieve that? And figure out if the MBA is the right one for you based on numerous factors, not just the rankings, not just the price, not just the location, but a combination of all these things to make sure that you have a satisfactory experience and a very positive one. So, with all that said, but there's so many more pieces of advice I could tell you, and so many more stories I could tell you about admissions, faux pas or things that you should do or that every candidate should do. But I'll leave it open to the floor for Q&A. In the meantime, I will just briefly tell you about John Molson School of Business. For those of you who might not have heard about Concordia and John Molson, we are located in the beautiful city of Montreal, which is the second largest city in Canada, just 1 hour away from Toronto. And I don't know where our audience is from, so I'm just giving you the large lines. We are top 5 in Canada, overall number 4 in Bloomberg and The Economist, so 2 major rankings. We were named number 1 in Canada for return on investment by the QS ranking because we have a very affordable tuition, but also great placement rates and great opportunities for our graduates. And we're also number 1 in Canada for entrepreneurship by The Economist. So that's just the ranking. As I mentioned earlier, don't focus just on the ranking, focus on what the school has to offer. And what we have to offer can be summarized into these 2 points. 1, it's very personalized and flexible. It's a small class size. We only recruit 80 students in the fall, 40 in the winter. Typically, the class size never exceeds 40 to 45 students. It's a wide network, however, because we mix our MBA full-time and part-time programs. And so at one given time at the university, you can have up to 300 people. So you can tap into a wide network, 50% local, 50% international. So a strong local but diverse network. And a very flexible schedule. You can take class in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. So there are a lot of different sections to fit what your lifestyle is going to be. So if you're a Canadian student and you want to continue working full-time, absolutely it's possible to do it. We offer real-world experience. So our program is very case-based. We bring cases as part of the learning experience, and we believe in experiential electives. That means that, let's say you want to have work experience in Canada, you can do a co-op internship, or let's say you want to do consulting. We have a small business consulting bureau, which counts 4 credits. Or if you're interested in community service initiative, you can take on, again, cases for nonprofit or non-governmental organization or community initiatives, and then do strategic input for them, and then you get credits for that as well. If you're interested in investment management, we have the Van Berkom Investment Management Program, which allows you to manage a $1 million fund, throughout 1 year, and basically do small cap investments. And so on and so on. So I could tell you about every single different type of classes, but basically whatever experience you're interested in having, you can shape that as part of the program. And we believe in doing it practically, so that when you go out in the job market, you have those skills already. And again, we offer an excellent return on investment, number 1 in Canada. Our tuition is extremely affordable. If you're an international student, it's approximately $40,000. If you are a Canadian student, approximately $15,000. And if you're a Quebec resident, it's heavily subsidized, so you only pay $6,000. So very affordable program for a high-ranked MBA with practical learning opportunities and a flexible schedule. And again, high placement opportunities. We have a 97% placement rate within 3 months of graduation. Our base salary average is $87,000. That's not counting non-guaranteed compensation bonuses, so it's really just a base. And again, our students place in a variety of fields in both Montreal and Toronto, so you tap into Canada's 2 largest job markets. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about what our programs have to offer, you want to hear more details about the program, about the electives, and so on, join me sometime this week. We have a full-time, part-time MBA webinar tomorrow, July 8th at 7 p.m. If you want to, you can email me, and then I'll help you register. If you're interested in MBA in investment management, which integrates the materials of the CFA charter, you can join me on July 16. We have online e-meets with our graduates of our programs every Friday at noon. And also we have admission tips and tricks, so a little bit of a longer version of what I just told you today on July 29th, and again, applicable to any program. So I'm now going to open the floor for Q&A. I'm going to leave my contact information here, and I'm going to open the Q&A section and answer them one by one. So the first question is from Andrea. Regarding the scores, can we compensate with good work experience for poor GMAT results? So if you have lower GMAT results, first make sure that it still meets the minimum requirement of a school, if they have one. If it is really far off the average, my recommendation is always to retake it. If you're not so far from the average, you could compensate for it in a number of ways, whether it is work experience, whether it is a better GPA, whether it is additional certifications, and so on. It really depends on what the school is looking for and how far you are. I would tell you that I have never met a school that will accept a candidate in the 400s. So you want to, generally schools will have kind of a recommended minimum of 600, and then they might be a bit more flexible in 500 scores, depending on what their average is. Our average at JMSB is a 640, so I tend to recommend all candidates to be above 600 and to be as close as possible, or above 650 for better chances of admission. But again, we look at it very holistically. So it's not going to be just the GMAT, it's going to be a combination of factors. But if you're very, very far off the mark, take it again. I know it's a little bit expensive, it's more preparation, but you'll be so happy when you did it, and it will be really worth it, I can guarantee that. The second question comes from John. How can I contact a current student? So if you want to contact a John Molson student, you can contact me and I'll introduce you. I'm more than happy to do that. Another way to do it is most programs will have an ambassador, student ambassador section. So you can get in touch through those pages. We have one as well at JMSB, and you know, when I was working at another university before, we also had one. So there's always ways to contact them. You can also just look them up on LinkedIn. Most people and depending on the network, I can tell you at JMSB, if you contact someone on LinkedIn, they will respond to you because that's how I reach out to them. And so I know it's a very collaborative and friendly network, but you could reach out to them. Or if you really want someone who has recently graduated, then you can let us at recruitment or admissions know. And typically there's no problem for us to make an introduction to someone that we know and who can share that experience with you. Another question from Josh is it better to ask an employer or a university teacher for reference? That depends a lot on the university, and also on what you're trying to showcase. Typically for an MBA, I like to recommend professional recommendations, especially more recent ones, because they can really attest to who you are as a professional, and we do have a lot of academic information in the rest of your application. However, let's say your GPA is a little bit lower, or let's say you didn't perform as well as you wanted on the GMAT and the university accepts academic references, it could be good to have a professor then, you know, who could attest to your ability to succeed through the program. It really depends what you want to showcase more specifically. A lot of MBA programs will only accept professional references, but there are some programs like ours that accept both. So make sure with the program that you're applying, which one they would prefer. But typically, a good professional reference will help you showcase who you are as a professional and as a future manager. Another question from Nico is there a particular part of the application process that is the most important one, like the interview? They're all very important, but it is true that the interview does matter quite a bit because overall, we're not looking for just paper perfect candidates. We're also looking for people who can communicate, who are prepared, who are professional. So the interview does matter quite a bit. The interview doesn't trump everything. We want to make sure you're going to succeed in the program. That's why we have those academic requirements. We want to make sure you're going to be employable. That's why we have the professional requirements. So I would say holistically and honestly, they're all very important. But for sure, you need to have a strong interview. Someone who is very strong on paper and who does very, very poorly in the interview could lose a chance to be selected, you know, because ultimately we need to have people who represent us well to employers. So take that in consideration. Again, it may depend from a program to another. I think they're all important parts to prepare for and to showcase as much as possible. But they all have different values in the application. So make sure to research and to find out also you can talk to different candidates and find out what their experience was with that. Some programs may not even have an in-person interview, or some programs may have multiple interviews. So make sure that you are prepared for each of these parts to understand what is the purpose of the interview at each of these schools, and to make sure that you prepare accordingly for that. Perfect. And I think there's a question in the chat box from Katina. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm sorry if I didn't. Will this year start online, and are there any changes in the process because of that? So I don't know about the other schools. I know that in Montreal, most programs have announced that they will have the fall starting online. There's no indication that we'll be online in the winter. We want to be back. Actually, we are hoping to be back as soon as possible because it's a much more interactive experience, of course. There's no changes in process for us. I mean, we have extended our deadlines a little bit. So for example, for the MBA, we accept candidates up until probably next week, as long as all of your documents are in, when typically we only accept until June. So we have extended our deadlines a little bit. At JMSB, we are open in the winter as well. So we accept candidates for January. And the deadline for that for Canadian students is October 1st. I believe the deadline for international has passed already. So in terms of the requirements, for us, they remain the same. We still require GMAT. We still require your work experience. We're going to require your statement of purpose, and so on. So there's not a significant change. One of our programs, the MBA in Investment Management, has shown a little bit more flexibility on some of their requirements, but with an expectation of GPA in the first term. So make sure with the programs that you're applying, because it may differ from one school to another. At JMSB, I could tell you that there's not a significant change due to COVID-19. We have just extended our deadlines a little bit longer to admit more Canadians, but in terms of the criteria, they haven't been relaxed. It's still the same process. So I think that covers all the questions that have been put online. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'm more than happy to answer them. It's a great opportunity. And if you want to talk about your case more specifically, your resume, or any other question, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, on email, or even WhatsApp or WeChat. I'm more than happy to answer the question then.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this interesting presentation and taking the time to answer all the questions. And thank all of you for joining this webinar. As Anna said, you can contact her anytime, and you can also do that throughout the platform. So you can send your questions as well through the platform. And of course, we have a lot of personal meetings and webinars to ask you to join. I will send via chat box a survey, a feedback survey. So I would be happy to receive your feedback on this webinar and the entire event. Thanks once again, and have a great day.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.